The morning air was crisp and slightly chilly, carrying the usual noises of the city. People rushed past, lost in their own world of meetings, errands, and responsibilities. On the corner of a quiet street near a small community center, a boy sat alone. His clothes were worn and dirty, his shoes had holes, and his hair was tangled. His eyes, though, held a spark that no one walking by seemed to notice at first. He was small, thin, and seemed invisible to most people. The morning crowd passed him like he was part of the pavement, another unnoticed shadow of the city. The community center was hosting a small event that morning. There was a piano placed near the entrance, polished and shining under the soft sunlight coming through the windows. A few people were already there, chatting and sipping coffee. They were expecting a simple morning, nothing out of the ordinary, maybe some soft background music, but nothing that would stop them in their tracks. The boy watched from a distance, his eyes drawn to the piano as if it called to him. He had seen pianos before in parks, in schools, and on the streets where other musicians played, but it had been a long time since he had a chance to touch one. A woman from the community center noticed him and approached gently. She crouched to his level, trying not to startle him. She spoke softly, asking if he liked music, if he knew how to play the piano. The boy's eyes widened, and he nodded quietly. His voice was barely a whisper when he said he could play a little. The woman looked around, unsure. She knew he was homeless and worried about letting him near the instrument. But something in his eyes, a mixture of hope and nervousness, made her pause. She smiled and told him he could play, just for fun, just to enjoy himself. No one was expecting a performance. It was just a way to pass the morning. The boy moved closer to the piano, his fingers hovering above the keys. His hands trembled slightly, not from cold, but from nerves. People around the room started to notice, some curious, some skeptical. A few whispered to each other, wondering why someone like him would even be there, let alone play such an expensive instrument. The boy took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a moment, and then gently pressed a key. A soft note filled the room. It was simple, quiet, almost hesitant. The sound caught some people off guard. They hadn't expected anything remarkable. They had only thought of a homeless boy fumbling around. But then he played another note, and the notes started to form a small melody. It was not perfect, not like a professional performance, but it had feeling. His hands moved carefully but confidently, as if they remembered every note from some long-forgotten time. The melody was soft at first, delicate, and it seemed to carry a quiet sadness. People stopped talking. They turned their heads, curious, and then they listened. The boy's music was different from the usual background tunes, different from the casual strumming of a guitar or the simple jingles from a speaker. It was real. It had life and emotion. A few people came closer, standing near the piano, still unsure if they should watch. The boy didn't look. He let the music guide his fingers. Each note seemed to tell a story, though no one could exactly tell what the story was. Some felt a pang of sadness, some felt a sudden warmth. A man sipping his coffee froze mid-sip. A young woman leaned against the wall, her eyes widening, feeling a lump in her throat. Even the volunteers at the center stopped moving, caught in a moment they hadn't expected. It was as if the music created a small bubble in the room, separating everyone from the ordinary morning chaos outside. The boy's confidence grew with each note. He started to play faster, a little more complex now, but still gentle. The piano seemed to come alive under his fingers, the sound filling the room with an energy that made everyone sit a little straighter. People who had been skeptical, who had thought he would fumble and embarrass himself, now watched with quiet awe. He didn't just play the piano, he spoke through it. His music told of hardships, of long days without food, of nights spent on cold streets, of longing for something better. It was a story no one could put into words, but everyone could feel. Some children wandered into the room, curious about the music. They didn't ask questions. They just sat on the floor listening. The boy noticed them, and for a brief moment he smiled. The music softened, becoming lighter, playful. He seemed to forget about the worries of the streets, about being hungry or cold. For a few minutes he was simply a boy at the piano, and the piano was simply his friend. The sound wrapped around the listeners, pulling at their hearts, and some could not hold back tears. There was something about the honesty in the music, the raw emotion that made it impossible to ignore. People began to whisper, quietly, not wanting to disturb the moment. Someone took out a phone and started recording. Others watched, mesmerized. The boy didn't notice. He was lost in the music, letting his hands move freely. There were mistakes here and there, a wrong note or two, but they didn't matter. The feeling behind the notes was stronger than perfection. It was as if the boy was telling the whole room everything he had never been able to say aloud. His music spoke of loneliness, hope, fear, and courage all at once. A man standing near the back wiped his eyes, suddenly aware of the depth of emotion in such a young person. He whispered to the person next to him that he had never heard anything so moving. The woman who had invited him to play watched him with a mix of pride and amazement. She had expected a simple tune, maybe a few clumsy notes, but this was something else. This was real. This was powerful. She realized that in that small, unassuming boy, the world had something truly extraordinary. The melody reached a soft pause. The boy lifted his hands slowly, almost reluctantly. The room was silent for a moment, as if everyone was holding their breath. Then a few soft claps began, growing steadily until the whole room applauded. Some people wiped their eyes, others smiled through tears. The boy looked up, startled, unsure of what was happening. He had not expected this. He had not expected anyone to notice or care so deeply. He bowed slightly, shyly, and sat back, feeling a strange mixture of pride and embarrassment. The woman came forward and gently placed a hand on his shoulder. She smiled warmly, telling him he had done beautifully. Others came up, offering kind words, some giving small donations, others offering food or warm drinks. The boy nodded quietly, overwhelmed by the attention but grateful. For the first time in a long while, he felt noticed, not as a homeless child, but as someone with talent, someone who could touch people's hearts. The morning continued, but it had changed for everyone there. The boy returned to the corner near the entrance, sitting quietly, but now people came to him, offering smiles, small talks, and kindness. He had made a connection through his music, something words could not achieve. And as the crowd dispersed, the boy looked at the piano once more, his eyes reflecting both hope and determination. He knew he had something special, and for the first time in a long time he felt that maybe, just maybe, the world might give him a chance to show it. The day went on, but the memory of that morning stayed with everyone who had been there. The boy's music had turned a simple, ordinary morning into something unforgettable. It had reminded people of the beauty of raw talent, of the power of emotion, and of the importance of seeing beyond appearances. And for the boy, it had been the start of something new, a small glimmer of hope in a world that had often overlooked him. As the morning went on, the boy stayed near the piano, his fingers still itching to play, though he didn't want to intrude. People came and went, some pausing to glance at him, some ignoring him completely, and some staying long enough to hear a few quiet notes. The boy observed everything carefully. He noticed the reactions of the listeners, the small smiles, the tears that appeared on faces, and the whispered words of admiration. He felt a strange warmth inside, a feeling he had rarely experienced. It was as if the music had connected him to the world for the first time in a long while. He glanced around and saw a few children lingering near the piano. They looked curious, drawn to him as if they could sense something special. The boy hesitated for a moment. He had never played for anyone outside of random strangers on the streets, but the curiosity in their eyes encouraged him. He sat down, his small hands hovering over the keys, and began to play once more. This time, the melody was softer, slower, but carried a gentle joy. It was lighter, happier, as if he wanted to share something positive with them. The children's faces lit up. They giggled softly when he played a playful sequence of notes, some of them tapping their feet along with the rhythm. The boy couldn't help but smile, feeling a sense of pride. For the first time, he felt that his music could not only express his own feelings but also bring happiness to others. He experimented with small melodies, trying different combinations of keys. Each time a new tune emerged, the children reacted, clapping softly, laughing, and encouraging him to continue. The room seemed alive in a way it had not been before. A few adults watched quietly, fascinated by the interaction. Some shook their heads, not believing that such talent could come from someone so young and without formal lessons. Others whispered to one another, discussing how remarkable it was that this boy, who had so little in life, could create something so beautiful. The music seemed to erase social boundaries, ignoring wealth, background, and expectations. In that small space, the boy and the listeners shared a connection that went beyond words. As he played, the boy's confidence grew. He remembered some tunes he had picked up from listening to street musicians and a few random piano lessons he had once had. He combined them in ways that sounded natural, unique, and heartfelt. He didn't play for applause or recognition. He played because it felt right. Each note carried emotion. Every melody told a story. Some air sad, some happy, and some a mixture of both. People could feel the depth of his experience through the music, and it touched them deeply. A man who had been sitting in the corner quietly approached him after a while. He crouched down to the boy's level and spoke softly, asking if he had ever had formal piano lessons. The boy shook his head. He explained in small, hesitant words that he had learned a few things from others on the street, from listening and practicing whenever he could find an instrument. The man nodded, impressed by the boy's determination and natural talent. He encouraged him to keep playing, telling him that he had something special, something that should be shared with more people. The boy continued to play, now experimenting with different emotions in his music. At one moment, his melody was light and playful. Then it shifted to something deep and melancholic. The listeners were captivated, some even closing their eyes to focus fully on the sound. The boy felt free, as though each note was a step away from the loneliness he had carried for so long. Music had become a language he could use to express what he couldn't say with words. Each chord, each pause, each flourish of his fingers was a piece of his story. Time passed quickly. The boy lost track of hours, wrapped up entirely in the music and the faces of the people around him. Some had come in skeptical but now stayed, mesmerized by the raw emotion flowing from the piano. Others had come in simply passing by but lingered, unable to tear themselves away. The boy felt a sense of responsibility for the feelings he was stirring, but it was not pressure. It was a quiet understanding that he could give a gift through his music. A few volunteers at the community center brought him water and some snacks. The boy accepted them with gratitude but didn't pause his playing. The small acts of kindness filled him with warmth. He felt seen, respected, and valued in a way he had rarely experienced. For a brief moment, he forgot the harsh realities of his life on the streets, the constant search for food and shelter, the nights spent in fear. For this morning, he existed only in the music and the shared emotions it created. By midday, more people had gathered. Some had heard about the boy from friends or online videos and came intentionally to see him play. The boy noticed their faces in the crowd and felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. He didn't know why so many people were interested in him, but he kept playing, letting the music speak for itself. Each note seemed to echo a little hope in the hearts of those listening, a reminder that beauty can exist in the most unexpected places. The boy began experimenting with improvisation, trying to create melodies that had never been heard before. He explored dynamics, soft notes followed by louder ones, delicate rhythms followed by bursts of energy. The piano responded to him as if it were an extension of his own body. Listeners were drawn in, some swaying slightly, others sitting still, completely absorbed. The room felt suspended in time, as if the outside world no longer existed. Only the boy, the piano, and the shared emotions remained. Some people started to ask questions afterward, wanting to know more about him. He was shy at first but answered politely. They learned that he had been living on the streets for some time, finding temporary shelters here and there, surviving on the kindness of strangers and whatever small jobs he could find. They learned that music had been his solace, the one thing that kept him going through difficult days and sleepless nights. The listeners felt a mixture of sadness and admiration, realizing how resilient and talented this boy truly was. Throughout it all, the boy never asked for anything. He didn't play for money, recognition, or comfort. He played because it brought him joy and allowed him to connect with others. And slowly, people began to notice not just his talent, but his character. His humility, his gratitude, and his genuine passion for music made an impression far greater than his skills alone. The afternoon light shifted, casting long shadows across the room. The boy played a final piece for the day, a soft, lingering melody that seemed to hold all the emotions of the morning. The audience was silent, not wanting to break the moment. When the last note faded, there was a pause, and then applause erupted. Some people wiped away tears, others smiled broadly, and some simply stood, overwhelmed by the experience. The boy looked up, surprised and a little embarrassed, but also proud. He had shared a part of himself in a way that words could never capture. As people left, many came forward to thank him, offer warm drinks, or simply shake his hand. Some promised to come back. Others encouraged him to continue pursuing music. The boy nodded quietly, absorbing the kindness and encouragement. He realized that music had given him a voice, a way to touch people's hearts, and perhaps even change the way they saw him. For the first time in a long time, he felt hope. He felt that maybe life could be a little kinder, and that perhaps he could find a place where he truly belonged. By the end of the day, the boy was tired but happy. He had shared his gift, connected with people, and felt a sense of belonging he had rarely experienced. The piano remained where it had always been, a silent companion, waiting for him to return. And as he walked away, his steps lighter than they had been in months, he carried with him the memory of a morning when music became more than just sound. It became a bridge, a language, and a reminder that even in the toughest circumstances, talent and heart could shine through and touch the lives of others in ways he had never imagined. The next day, the boy returned to the community center, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He remembered the reactions from the previous day, the way people had stopped and listened, the smiles and the tears, and he felt both proud and uncertain. Would it be the same today? Would anyone notice him, or would the crowd be smaller, less interested? He carried himself quietly, his eyes scanning the room for familiar faces. A few people smiled when they saw him, and some of the children he had played for yesterday ran up to greet him, their laughter filling the air. That small greeting gave him courage. The piano stood in its usual spot, shiny under the sunlight that streamed through the windows. He approached it slowly, almost reverently, as if it were an old friend waiting to hear him again. His fingers hovered above the keys, and for a moment he hesitated. Then, slowly he pressed down, letting a single note ring through the room. The sound was pure and clear, and it felt like a welcome back, a signal that today, too, he would speak through the music. He started with a soft melody, gentle and calm, drawing in the listeners one by one. This time, more people were present. Word had spread quickly after the first day, and some visitors had come specifically to hear the boy play. There were journalists and volunteers, along with regular visitors, curious passersby, and children who remembered him from yesterday. Everyone gathered around quietly, waiting, unsure of what to expect. The boy noticed their anticipation and felt a strange pressure. But he took a deep breath and let the music flow naturally, without thinking too much about how it would be received. The first few notes were cautious, almost shy, but gradually they grew stronger, richer, and more expressive. The boy played with emotion, letting his life experiences guide each chord. There was sadness in some sequences, hope in others, and pure joy in the playful parts that reminded him of happier times. People were captivated. They leaned in, some closing their eyes, letting the music touch them. It was impossible not to be drawn in by the honesty in his playing, the way every note carried a piece of his story. As he continued, he began to add small improvisations, melodies that had never been written down, tunes that were entirely his own. His hands moved with increasing confidence, each finger knowing exactly where to go. The listeners watched in awe, some whispering to each other about how extraordinary it was that someone so young and so disadvantaged could create such beautiful music. A few tears were quietly wiped away as the boy's music resonated deeply, stirring emotions that people hadn't realized were hidden within them. At one point, a young woman approached the boy after he paused briefly. She knelt beside him and asked how he had learned to play so well without formal lessons. The boy shrugged, modest and humble, explaining that he had listened to street performers, borrowed music whenever he could, and practiced whenever a piano was available. He spoke softly, and his words carried the same sincerity as his music. She smiled and told him he had a gift that deserved to be shared far beyond this room. The boy's eyes widened slightly, not used to being praised, and he nodded quietly. The music flowed again, now deeper, more emotional. The boy's melody told a story without words. It spoke of nights spent alone on cold streets, of hunger and longing, of moments of kindness that he remembered vividly. Some in the audience felt a lump in their throats. Others felt a sudden warmth, as if they were being hugged by the music itself. Every note seemed to hold a memory, and every chord carried his experiences and dreams. The boy was no longer just playing piano. He was sharing his life with the world in the most heartfelt way. A small group of volunteers brought him water and a sandwich, placing them nearby. The boy smiled in thanks but did not stop playing. He felt supported, seen, and understood, and that gave him the courage to explore new melodies, more daring and complex than before. He experimented with rhythms, soft and loud passages, and playful variations that surprised even him. The piano seemed to respond to him, echoing his emotions as if it were alive, creating a dialogue between him and the instrument. People began to record the performance again, whispering to one another about how incredible it was that someone living on the streets could produce music that felt so professional and emotional. The boy, however, was unaware of the attention. He was immersed in the act of creating, lost in the music, feeling free from the worries of survival, even if only for a few hours. Music had become his refuge, his language, and his way to communicate what words could not. As he played, a local journalist approached with a small microphone, asking if he could share a few words for a story. The boy nodded shyly, explaining that he simply loved to play and hoped that people could feel what he felt through music. The journalist smiled, recognizing the honesty in his voice, and promised to share the story with the hope that more people would understand the boy's talent and resilience. The boy returned to the piano, letting the sound speak louder than words ever could. The afternoon grew quieter as more people stopped to listen, their usual routines paused by the beauty of the music. Some were strangers who had never met the boy, yet they felt connected to him through the melodies. Others were familiar faces from the community, returning to support him and witness his growth. Children sat closer, captivated by the gentle, playful tunes, and even a few adults found themselves tapping their feet, unable to resist the rhythm. The piano became a center of warmth, comfort, and inspiration. Eventually, the boy transitioned into a slower, more reflective piece. The music carried a sense of longing, of dreams unfulfilled, yet it was not sorrowful. It was a mixture of hope and perseverance, a reminder that despite hardships, there was always something to strive for, a light at the end of the tunnel. Listeners were moved, some silently crying, others feeling a quiet motivation, inspired by the resilience reflected in every note. When the final chord echoed and faded, there was a moment of silence, a collective breath held by everyone present. Then, applause erupted, filling the room with warmth and admiration. The boy looked up, surprised and slightly embarrassed by the attention, but he felt pride as well. People approached him, offering smiles, compliments, and small gestures of kindness. Some brought warm drinks, others just shook his hand or nodded in respect. It was a celebration of his talent, yes, but also of his courage and heart. As the crowd began to disperse, the boy stayed by the piano for a few more minutes, letting the room settle into calm. He reflected on the experience, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. He had shared his soul through music and had touched people in a way that he never imagined possible. He felt connected, appreciated, and alive in a manner that transcended his previous life of isolation and struggle. He glanced around the room one last time, noticing the lingering smiles, the tearful eyes, and the thoughtful expressions. Music had created a bridge between him and everyone present. It was a powerful reminder that even in difficult circumstances, one could reach others and inspire feelings of compassion, empathy, and joy. And as he finally stood to leave, he felt a quiet confidence, a newfound understanding of the impact his music could have, and a sense of hope that perhaps this was just the beginning of a journey that could change his life and touch many more hearts. After the boy's music had touched so many hearts, news of his talent began to spread quickly through the city. People who had watched him play shared videos online, and soon the story of the young homeless boy and his extraordinary piano skills reached far beyond the small community center. It was a mix of amazement and inspiration that caught the attention of local newspapers, small television channels, and social media users who were moved by the raw emotion in his music. For the boy, life continued quietly, but the world around him was beginning to notice something extraordinary. One afternoon, a music teacher from a nearby school arrived at the community center. She had seen the video online and wanted to meet the boy. She approached him cautiously, introducing herself with a warm smile, explaining that she wanted to help him develop his talent further. The boy, initially shy and unsure, listened quietly. He had never had anyone offer him proper lessons or guidance, and he was nervous about trusting someone new. Yet there was something in her tone, gentle and sincere, that made him nod in agreement. He wanted to learn and grow to see how far his music could take him. The teacher arranged for him to attend the school after his days at the community center. It was a simple plan, but one that opened a world he had never imagined. She provided a small scholarship for him, covering lessons, books, and supplies. For the first time, the boy realized that someone truly believed in his potential, not just as a talented street performer, but as a young person who deserved guidance, education, and opportunity. This recognition brought a sense of hope he had not felt in years. Meanwhile, the community continued to support him. Local volunteers helped him with food, warm clothing, and a place to rest between his lessons and the hours spent practicing the piano. People came to see him play regularly, and he was no longer just a lonely figure in the streets. He became a symbol of perseverance and talent, showing that even in difficult circumstances, a person could rise above and touch lives. He still remained humble, never asking for attention or praise, but slowly accepting the kindness extended to him. One day, a small charity group approached him with an offer. They wanted to feature him in a local concert, alongside other musicians, giving him a platform to showcase his talent to a wider audience. The boy was nervous at first. He had only played in intimate spaces before, and the thought of performing on a stage with hundreds of people watching felt overwhelming. But the teacher encouraged him, explaining that this was an opportunity to share his gift and inspire even more people. With cautious determination, he agreed, knowing that this could be a turning point. As the day of the concert approached, the boy practiced diligently. He spent hours at the piano, perfecting pieces, learning new techniques, and experimenting with compositions of his own. Each session was an emotional journey, recalling memories of hardship, moments of joy, and fleeting glimpses of hope. Music had become more than a talent. It was a lifeline, a way to express what words could not convey. The anticipation of the concert brought both excitement and anxiety, but he trusted the music to guide him. The evening of the performance arrived, and the hall was filled with people eager to hear the boy play. He waited backstage, his hands slightly trembling, listening to the applause for other performers. The boy thought about the journey that had brought him here, from the streets to the community center to this very stage. He remembered the small audience that had first believed in him, and it gave him courage. When it was finally his turn, he took a deep breath and walked onto the stage, the lights bright but comforting, the piano waiting like an old friend. He sat down, closed his eyes for a brief moment, and then began to play. The first notes were soft, tentative, but they quickly grew in confidence and emotion. The music carried all of his experiences: the pain, the hunger, the loneliness, the moments of kindness, and the spark of hope that had kept him moving forward. The audience listened in silence, captivated by the depth and sincerity of his performance. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others held their breath, touched in ways they could not explain. As he continued, the boy's melodies became more complex, blending classical pieces with his own improvisations. Each note seemed to tell a story. Each chord resonated with feelings that transcended the room. Tears appeared in the eyes of many, while others smiled, moved by the beauty and honesty of his music. He was no longer just a talented boy. He was a storyteller, a young person whose life experiences were expressed through the piano, reaching directly into the hearts of those who listened. After the performance, the applause was thunderous. People stood, clapping and cheering, some calling out words of praise and admiration. The boy looked up, overwhelmed by the response, feeling a mixture of pride, humility, and disbelief. He had never imagined that his music could move so many people, that his life story could inspire kindness and emotion in others. He realized that his journey was no longer solitary. He was connected to a world that had begun to believe in him, a world that now recognized his talent and his spirit. Following the concert, the boy's story gained wider attention. Local newspapers featured him, social media shared his performances, and charitable organizations offered further support. People were inspired by the contrast between his hardships and his extraordinary talent, by his resilience and humility. Invitations for performances, lessons, and collaborations came in, opening doors he had never imagined. And through it all, the boy remained grounded, remembering the small community center where it all began, and the people who had first given him a chance to play for fun. His life gradually transformed, though he remained true to himself. Music became a source of stability, hope, and growth. He continued to attend lessons, practice daily, and shared his gift with anyone willing to listen. The piano, once just a simple instrument, had become his voice, his companion, and a symbol of possibility. Every time he played, he remembered where he had come from and the moments that had shaped him, using them to create melodies that touched hearts and inspired others. Even as his fame and recognition grew, he never forgot the kindness of strangers and the importance of humility. He often returned to the community center to play for children and people who had not yet had the chance to hear his music. He encouraged them, shared stories, and reminded them that talent and heart could shine, even in the hardest circumstances. His journey was no longer just about survival. It was about giving, inspiring, and creating connections through the universal language of music. By the end of the year, the boy had changed significantly. He had gained confidence, learned new techniques, and found a sense of purpose. The world had seen his talent, and more importantly, it had seen his heart. Opportunities continued to come, but he remained humble, focused on the music and the people he could touch through it. Each performance was a reminder of the journey from the streets to the stage, from loneliness to connection, and from despair to hope. And through it all, the piano remained a constant companion, a faithful friend that had carried him through the darkest times and now celebrated the brightest moments of his life. The boy's life had changed in ways he could never have imagined. From the streets, to the community center, to the stage, every step had been a journey of discovery, learning, and growth. He continued to practice every day, dedicating hours to improving his craft and exploring new melodies. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It had become a bridge to a world that once felt distant and unreachable. Each note he played carried the weight of his experiences and the hope for a future that was slowly unfolding before him. People continued to take notice. Visitors to the community center often stopped to hear him play, drawn by the music that had become his signature. Local schools invited him to perform for students, sharing his story alongside the melodies he created. The boy, once shy and unsure, now stood with quiet confidence, letting his music speak for him. He did not perform for recognition or fame. He performed because music had given him a voice, a way to express what words could not. With each performance, the audience was touched by more than just his talent. They saw resilience, determination, and a heart that refused to give up despite the challenges he had faced. People who had first met him on the street continued to follow his journey, inspired by the transformation they witnessed. Volunteers and supporters who had helped him along the way felt pride and joy, knowing that their small acts of kindness had contributed to something greater. The boy had become a living example of how talent, courage, and compassion could change lives. The music teacher who had first believed in him continued to mentor him, guiding him through advanced techniques, helping him understand the nuances of composition, and encouraging him to explore his own style. Lessons were no longer just about playing notes. They were about expression, emotion, and storytelling. The boy soaked up every piece of advice, every bit of guidance, using it to refine his performances. His growth was steady and remarkable, not only in skill but in confidence and self-belief. He was learning that talent alone was not enough. Perseverance, practice, and humility were equally important. One day, a local foundation dedicated to supporting young artists approached him with an offer to provide a stable home and full-time support for his education and music training. The boy, though hesitant at first, realized the opportunity could change the course of his life entirely. Accepting it meant leaving behind some of the familiar routines of the streets and the community center, but it also meant security, resources, and a chance to reach his full potential. With guidance from the teacher and the people who had supported him, he made the decision to accept, opening a new chapter in his life. Settling into a more stable environment allowed the boy to focus even more on his music. He practiced diligently, explored new genres, and even began composing his own pieces. Each melody carried a sense of story, drawing from his past experiences, the people who had helped him, and the dreams he now dared to imagine. The piano became a companion in both solitude and performance, a trusted friend that never failed to respond to his touch. Music was no longer just a skill or hobby. It was his identity, a language through which he communicated his soul. Opportunities continued to grow. Invitations to perform at charity events, school functions, and local concerts became frequent. Each time he played, he carried with him the memory of the streets, the community center, and the first audience that had truly seen him. He played with honesty, vulnerability, and emotion that resonated with listeners of all ages. The applause, smiles, and tears of those who heard him were reminders that his music had the power to connect, inspire, and heal. Despite the growing recognition, the boy remained humble. He remembered the kindness of strangers who had given him small moments of comfort, the teacher who had invested her time and faith, and the volunteers who had provided support when he needed it most. He often returned to the community center, performing for children and newcomers, sharing not only his music but also the story of perseverance and hope. His presence became a source of inspiration, showing that talent, when nurtured with care and kindness, could transcend difficult circumstances. The boy's compositions began to reflect more than just technical skill. They reflected life itself. His music told stories of struggle, resilience, joy, and hope. It carried the emotions of someone who had known hardship but had also experienced kindness, opportunity, and growth. Listeners often commented on how his music moved them in ways that words could not, and he began to understand the true power of the gift he had been given. He realized that music was more than a personal outlet. It was a bridge that connected hearts and minds. Over time, the boy's life continued to transform. He became more confident in public speaking, sharing his story alongside performances to inspire others. He formed friendships with other young musicians, exchanging ideas, learning together, and encouraging one another. His days were filled with practice, study, and small performances, each experience reinforcing his passion and dedication. The stability and support he had received allowed him to focus on growth rather than survival, and he embraced every opportunity with gratitude and humility. Even with all the progress, the boy never forgot where he came from. The streets, the hardships, the people who had helped him. They remained a part of his story and a source of motivation. He understood that his journey could inspire others, and he felt a responsibility to give back. Through music, mentorship, and personal example, he became a symbol of resilience, showing that even those who begin with nothing could create beauty and touch lives. One day, during a performance at a large community event, the boy played a piece he had composed himself. The melody was rich with emotion, blending softness and power, sadness and hope. The audience was captivated, some moved to tears, others listening in silent awe. In that moment, it became clear that his journey was not only about personal success but about the connection he created through music. His story, shared through every note, touched hearts and inspired action. People were reminded of the power of empathy, of seeing the humanity in others, and of the potential for change when talent meets opportunity. By the time he reached adolescence, the boy had transformed from a shy, homeless child into a young musician with remarkable skill, confidence, and presence. Yet he remained grounded, humble, and grateful, carrying the lessons of kindness, patience, and perseverance wherever he went. Music had given him more than a voice. It had given him a chance at life, a way to connect with people, and a sense of purpose. Every performance, every lesson, every small act of sharing his gift became a testament to his journey. In the end, the boy's story was not just about music or talent. It was about the human spirit, about resilience in the face of hardship, and about the transformative power of compassion and opportunity. From the streets to the community center, from small audiences to large stages, he had shown that even the most challenging circumstances could give rise to extraordinary possibilities. His piano remained the constant companion through it all, a symbol of hope, expression, and the boundless potential within each person. And as he continued to play, he inspired others, reminding everyone that no matter where life begins, it can lead to places of beauty, connection, and profound impact.